Good.
And photography.
We going?
Yep.
Are we rolling? Okay. We're going to get where we get to. This was the thoughts here were started before coming here and before seeing what Bruce had in mind for the last session this morning. So here's my use case. My recyclable vegetable fiber delivery system uses a queuing mechanism, but unfortunately that queuing platform doesn't always exhibit the dry principle. Therefore, I have to have a solution. Here's my solution in a concrete environment. It's a wrapper of something that is useful. Here's maybe a more generic version of the wrapper. Wait, let's change the subject. Those of you that were here last year know that a year and a half ago on Thanksgiving night, my wife fell down a flight of stairs and shattered her shoulder and elbow. These are not really her x-rays, this is typical client. And therefore required a lot of attention, including these things. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Including these things that sort of make your arm real bulky, especially if your entire arm from one end to the other is highly sensitive. And if this happens at Thanksgiving and you've got to deal with this through March, when JavaPosse Roundup occurs, you know, it requires some insulation. Well, it's very difficult to get a coat over one of those things. So if you don't learn anything else tonight, here's the useful fact that I hope you never use. You can take one of these, slip it over the arm with all the wrapping and stuff and so forth. This is a very low coefficient of friction versus cloth. So now you can pull the sleeve up over this thing and then pull this out, and the arm is appropriately insulated. Back on track. When we talk about electric we tend to think of this sort of thing. But when you look at those sorts of things, they start looking like there's not very much depth to them. They're about as representative of the quote-unquote real thing as this fellow is of a real employee. Of course, this guy can't possibly be an intern in a development organization. He has way too many tabs. But real objects, unlike the things we build that we call objects, have some characteristics. And I'm not using properties in the instant properties sense, but in the generic sense. They have intentional properties. That is, things that were fabricated to do something, and so they typically have characteristics that relate to that. But they have emergent and what I would like to call fortunate instead of accidental properties. That is, they have properties that are just inherent on what they are. They have discoverable properties. We can find out, based on what this thing does, other uses for it, whether it was designed for that purpose or not. We also have external metadata. I have now told you how you can use one of these things. You didn't have to have that bound onto this thing. And now, if you should perish the thought, ever be in a similar circumstance, you have the external metadata to use this object in the fashion that I described. By the way, Bruce mentioned parallelism this morning. If this thing, which weighs approximately a gram, has about the same number of molecules as a gram of water, it's about 2 times 10 to the 22nd molecule, so it's massively parallel. So real objects like this are capable of unplanned reuse. We enjoy folks who show us ingenious ways to put things to repurposes, different purposes than we might have expected. We think that's really great. We think that's ingenious. Of course, some of the reuses are a little pathological. But as we go forward, I think the question is, what are we programming about? When we started learning how to program, we programmed about data. I want to add some numbers. I want to sort some strings, whatever. Our focus is on just manipulating data. Then structured programming came along and talked to us about thinking of your program in terms of the organizations of the actions on data. Object-oriented programming taught us about other kinds of organizations and packaging, but we still need these ways to discover objects, to discover properties of the objects, and to find out that an object has a property even if somebody didn't have to say, I want it to have that property to begin with, just because of its inherent construction. And maybe that's a key to something that will happen to programming between now and 25 years out. Thank you.